With the introduction of the Castlevania DLC, we can all agree on two things. It's really well done, and it's a shame that we didn't get Dracula's Castle as a map. However, that made me wonder, what would have happened if every single DLC had a killer, survivor, and a map included? Well, let's take a look at each incomplete license chapter to see what behavior could have added in the game. And let's start with the very first paragraph we ever got, and that's the Left 4 Dead collab with Bill Overbeck, the first horror game to enter DVD, and we already run into a problem with it. Left 4 Dead does not have any iconic horror villains to add as killers, and instead, the only option they have would be to add one of the special infecteds as killers. But which one? In my opinion, there are only two options, and that would be to add the Tank as a violent, gigantic strength-based killer capable of throwing survivors, or the Witch as a more scary concept, with her crying as a possible lullaby. I personally think the Witch is more fitting for DVD compared to the Tank. As for the map, this topic is a bit more complicated, as Left 4 Dead has a lot of very distinct and iconic levels on it. The Dark Carnival campaign of Left 4 Dead 2 would be pretty unique as a setting for a level. However, if I had to go with the most realistic choice, it would have to be a level placed on the same realm as Backwater Swamp, inspired on the Swamp Fever campaign from the same game, with maybe the plane as the main building of that map. Next up, we have the very first big license that didn't get a full chapter, the first solo killer, Leatherface. Right from the start, we have a huge issue with the map, as the Hillbillies realm would be very similar compared to the Sawyer house, as proven by the Chainsaw Massacre game. But did you know that the Grim Pantry map, the second map added for the swamp, was added with Leatherface? This technically makes it his map, so on that front we are covered. But how about the survivor? Well, it has to be none other than Sally Hardesty, which would make her the oldest final girl we would have in the game, as she was created before Laurie Strode. In fact, her prestige could be a cool reference to her final iconic scene. In terms of cosmetics and overall aesthetic, I do feel like she would be very similar to Kate Denson. We now advance 2 years to the future as we arrive to the Ash vs Evil Dead DLC, a chapter that many players thought was undercooked as it had a lot of potential for various maps and a killer. However, this license has another huge problem, and that is the fact that the license we got in-game is for the Ash vs Evil Dead show and not the original Evil Dead films, and that makes a lot of characters like Evil Ash require a completely different license to get in-game. Other major villains like Henrietta would also need them to acquire the license to Evil Dead 2. Truth be told, I am not as invested in this franchise to pick a specific character as a killer. As for the maps, we run into the same problem. Castle Kandar would make an insanely cool map, as we have been wanting a castle in Dead by Daylight for a long while. Another idea would have to be the original cabin of the original Evil Dead films in an already set realm, like Disturbed Ward or Autohaven, similar to how Vecna's dungeon is in the Knight's map. And speaking of Disturbed Ward, the Kenworth County Asylum from the show would also make a nice map part of the Disturbed Ward realm. And now comes the most problematic license for this video, which is the Ghostface one. As you may know already, the license we have is for the Mask by Funworld, which makes the Ghostface we have in-game have nothing in common with the Scream franchise. This means that for them to get Sidney Prescott and to get a map based on the Scream films, they would have to renegotiate the entire license in order to do so. So, the only other option for them is to create an entirely original victim as well as give an original map to Ghostface. And let's be honest, I cannot be the only one who wanted Carl the cashier and the store where he buys the knife as a map for Dead by Daylight. To this day, I am still waiting for a shopping center or an IKEA warehouse as a map where pallets would actually make sense. The other option would be to make a map based on Roseville, the main point where he commits most of his killings, as something similar to Haddonfield in terms of gameplay. And now let's talk about the 3 only original chapters in this game that came without a map, as by the time the Blight was announced, Behavior made the decision of reworking the past maps for the Realm Beyond project. This meant that neither the Blight, the Trickster, or the twins got their own map or even a version of a past map, which was a first for a chapter, which is really sad because a map for all of them would have gone hard. For the Blight, Behavior could have easily implemented Vigo's laboratory as one of the maps placed inside an already existing realm. I personally think it would have made sense if the original Shelter Woods had the laboratory hidden somewhere, but that idea was taken by the school merchant. For the Trickster, they had the golden ticket of making a cramped, neon-filled Korean street with maybe an indoor portion showing the studio where Trickster's band burned. A map like this would be a first in the game, as we don't have any urban city-based maps yet where the gameplay would feel like indoors despite it being mostly outdoors. For twins, now that we have the decimated Borgo, I think adding the temple where they were taken would be really cool as a submap for that realm, as that would be a very important place for them. If not, having a French medieval town where their mother was burned would also fit thematically. The Hellraiser chapter was the first license in a long while to go back to only adding a killer, with no survivor and no map either. Take this with a grain of salt, but according to Mazuzder, one of the most prominent leakers from the DVD Leaks community, Hellraiser was originally supposed to have a map, but it was scrapped because it was too sexual. Considering the topics of the original Hellraiser films, it seems like we were going to get a freaky dungeon as part of this license. I still think the labyrinth, the dimension where they come from, would be cool, but I mainly want more indoor maps in the game. As for the survivors, it's obvious we need Kirsty Cotton, as she is by far the most iconic character from that film, and she is also one of the only 2 humans that were not taken by the Cenobites despite summoning them. We also need more final girls in the game, as that's one of the most iconic tropes in classic horror films. And even though chronologically the next chapter is another one we will talk about later, I wanted to mention how Sadako's chapter was also supposed to get a map, but it was scrapped, and funnily enough, this was shown on the trailer, as the trailer shows the entity's lockers inside Sadako's TV room, so we almost got a map that was based on the place that appears on the trailer. Too bad we didn't get it in the end. And another quick pointer I wanted to add is that I find it very lazy how the map for Wesker was just dividing a map we already had in half and calling it a day. I wish we had the exterior part of RPD, Raccoon City, as a playable map, just like it was shown on the original trailer for Nemesis where Leon throws a pallet on a police car loop. I would really like an urban map, especially one that is apocalyptic and would make for some good gameplay tiles in-game. Nicolas Cage was designed as a solo survivor chapter from the start, as the main catch of this license is the actor himself. However, I do think having a map based on the island that the Stampers bring Nicolas would be really cool and be a very insane piece of the lore, which would also tie in with the lore of the Farias with Elodie and Felix, and also the Black Veil cult. Chucky, on the other hand, was not made like Nicolas Cage, and I think for sure it would have benefited from a map, but maybe not a survivor. If they had to choose one survivor, I would go with Andy, as he was the main character from the original films, even if he was a kid. But I feel like he would end up like Yoichi, where nobody would play him outside of Chucky fans. But Behavior had the golden opportunity with introducing the Good Guy Factory as a map very similar to the game. Yeah, I hopefully made it clear that I desperately want more indoor maps, and I don't care if the community hates them. I would rather play on Hawkins or Larry's than Ivy of Crows or Garden of Joy. Alan Wake is another DLC that should have gotten a killer in the game, as I think the dynamic of a survivor also being the same killer in that chapter is something we have been wishing for years. Of course, it would have to be none other than Mr. Scratch, which would visually look the same as Alan Wake, just with some creepy tones. Map-wise, Bright Falls would also be a really cool map in the game, especially if you could enter the police station and the diner where Rose works as part of the playable map. And the best part about this realm is that there are plenty of places they could use for playable maps too, like the coffee amusement park, which is very creepy, or the dark place as well, which visually would be one of the best maps in Dead by Daylight. And finally, we have Lara Croft as the last half chapter we got as of the release of this video, and some of you might not know, especially if you're not familiar with the license, but the Lara Croft we have in-game is from the Survivor trilogy, which is different from the classic versions of Lara. For that reason, various of the characters that would fit as killers in DVD, like for example Natla, are exclusive for classic Lara, and since I didn't play Shadow of the Tomb Raider yet, I don't know if there's anyone fitting as a villain and killer for the game. As for the maps, again, Atlantis would have been a really cool and grotesque map for Dead by Daylight, but if I had to choose one map from the Survivor trilogy, it has to be the island of Yamatai, where the loops would be parts of the shipwreck of the Endurance. I have always wanted a tropical map in the game for a very long time. And that's all the half licensed chapters we had in Dead by Daylight. If you're wondering why I didn't talk about Michaela, that's because she is original, so Behavior could do anything they wanted with that character. Let me know if you would change something. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.